Acquiring and holding on to clients is not an easy task. Traditionally, sales reps in particular offer gifts, meals, and entertainment, and those gestures do build surface level goodwill. The problem is this approach does not necessarily create a long lasting relationship. So let's have ourselves a pocket sized pep talk because the sales community must shift away from superficial transactional gestures to offering something more substantial, true, personalized value that resonates with the client. That's where a new form of value added support comes in, and with it, deeper connections that are more ethical and sustainable in the long run. Curious? I sure would be.
A Pocket Sized Pep Talk, the podcast that can help energize your business and your life with a quick, inspiring message. Now, here's your host, Rob Jolles.
Today's guest, Dana Klein, is a speaker and consultant who designs scalable workshops that combine advanced negotiation strategies with persuasion principles. Drawing on his certifications from the Wharton School of Negotiation and the Cialdini Institute in Ethical Persuasion, these workshops enable participants to improve a litany of interpersonal exchanges. And one more thing, he doesn't just deliver these programs to clients, he delivers them to his clients' clients. See that? Value add concept in play right there. Happy to have you with us and welcome to the show, Dana.
Hey, Rob, thank you very much. I really appreciate this. It's great to meet you and have some time together.
You bet. It's a pleasure. And I want to dive right in with you. And although I certainly hinted at it at the opening, I want to make sure everybody understands your definition of value add. So let's start there. What's your definition for it?
Well, the way I look at it, Rob, is I think about most salespeople that I know, and it doesn't matter. I've been talking to my doctor, a dentist, financial advisors, which is really, my core expertise. But the reality is that when people come in, and what I would call it a B2B sale, those people come in and all they want to do is talk about their latest and greatest product. And frankly, that's how they get paid. Most of them are on some kind of a commission, whether it's, for the prescription drug business or, dental tools or, aftermarket parts for the part department at a car dealer. The reality is they want to sell this latest thing. And guess what? So is everybody else. They're not differentiating themselves. They're just, don't take this the wrong way, but they're holding up the shiny watch.
Right.
They kind of open up the, like the Inspector Gadget, they open up their little, trench coat and, oh, hey, what do you want? A Rolex? $100 for you. The reality is, though, advisors, doctors, dentists, buyers see through that. And I think the best way to get started is, frankly, to use a very simple concept called reciprocity. If I give something to you, then you have a sense of obligation.
All right, I'm going to want to dive deep into reciprocity because I think there's some misunderstandings there, and I'm pretty sure you can clear them up. But let me just put a pin in where we're at here. Okay. So to me, when I first met the financial industry, value add was 2 tickets on the floor of a Knicks game. And you're saying something else. So let's talk about how it's changed, because that certainly was the model back in sort of the 80s and into the 90s-ish. And then things changed. So when did it change and why did it change?
It's great. Rob, you and I have known each other for, let's just say, more than 5 years. Maybe.
How about, no, listen, we don't hide anything on the podcast. I met Dana as I was sort of being introduced to what value add was, and Dana was on the other side as the client who was explaining it to me. So it's okay. How about 31 years ago, at least Dana and I met? Okay. So now we got that on the table. Walk us through it, because when I met you, I really did think it was, I'm not sure why I'm here. I thought you just send people to a funny restaurant or a nice hotel and you thank them for their business. But you said no, you had a different way.
Yeah. And, look, here's the thing, Rob, in a nutshell. The reality is that most, most financial advice or B2B sales or any sales really, people are like, they want to understand more than just, oh, here's my shiny watch. This is the greatest one. Well, if I go down the street, the other one is just as like it. The next person that comes in to talk to me, theirs is going to be as good or better. So I think what you need to do as a salesperson is set yourself up and be different. Learn something that is a skill that you can help whoever it is, whether it's another salesperson or a buyer, how can they be better at something? Now, when we used you, we had at another firm, here we had this great sales trainer who came out of a fabulous organization. We can say that starts with an X, sometimes it's called Xerox. And he then built his own system. Buyer focused selling became customer centered selling. And you had a process, a predictable, repeatable process. I can't tell you how many thousands of times I've heard that saying. And the reality is that if they embraced it and I internalized it and I used it, all of a sudden I look around, I see more and more how other people are doing it. Whether I'm watching, an episode of The Office on TV or some other TV, movie, whatever, I start to see these things. I have a certain level of awareness, and then I can start to talk to other people about it. Hey, let me show you how you could be a better persuader, how you could be a better salesman, how you could be better at some life skill.
Yeah.
Now, I really connected with the concept of negotiation, the concepts of client experience. And as I dove into them, what I realized that they're really based on psychology, on social psychology. And there's a tremendous amount of work that's been done on this. And if you spend some time, you can, internalize it and learn it. And that's basically what I did.
Yeah. All right. So let's sort of unpack a little bit of this. First of all, I don't know why we're avoiding company names. It was the great Van Camp and Merritt that we met at. That
I
company's
didn't
changed
know
its
it.
name 7 times since then.
Yeah.
But the cool part was, and I want people to hear this because this is where Dana's going right now. Cool part was you would think, okay, I'm going to go in, I'm going to work with this company in Chicago. I'm going to train its 22 salespeople and we'll sales train them. Have a nice day. But that's not the model that Van Camp and Merritt came up with. They really did say, yeah, obviously we want our people trained. But what would happen if you trained our clients the way you're training us and we were a part of that? So in a sense, I think the metamorphosis that was occurring was we're not going to buy the salesperson that we're trying to get their business from a steak. We're actually going to help them become more successful in what they're doing. And if we do that, good things are going to happen for us. And that was, to me, the dawn of true value added. Now, you created a lot of programs, and I know you love that negotiation. But let's go back. Let's step off of that whole customer centered selling piece. That's how it got started, at least in my mind. And you were an intricate part of that. Tell me about the first program you created, and kind of how you began to kind of spawn off.
Well, we have to go back to the old Rocky and Bullwinkle and the Wayback Machine with
Wasn't that
Simon.
Mr. Peabody?
Exactly.
Okay.
And in it for the 1996 election, a lot of proposals revolved around this thing called a flat tax.
Hmm.
And every candidate had a flat tax proposal. Now, whatever happened to them, who knows? Obviously, most of those candidates, they're no longer with us. But the point is that there was a lot of confusion. And so we started with a simple presentation that said, here's what it is. Your clients are hearing about it. You turn on the news. Back then it was, ABC, CBS, and NBC, but you were going to hear somebody talking about, their flat tax proposal. And so we created like a little roadmap and we created a presentation. It was something that we could talk to financial advisors about, but all of our salespeople, our wholesalers, as we call them at the Great Van Camp and Merritt, could run around and talk about it and show people, open this little thing up and, oh, hey, look at this. Frankly, it was so big, it was like a roadmap. Like if you remember in the old days, you sat in your car and you opened this thing up. That's how many proposals there were. And that really connected with people because we were educating about them about something. In this case, we were making them look pretty smart because they could then turn around and show that to their clients. Here, let me show you what that Forbes guy is saying versus, some of the other candidates. Um, and it really started to connect. And that's really, to me, the light bulb moment that there's
And what
something here.
Yeah, and what's cool about this, Dan, and I want people who are listening to really focus on this for a moment. This took guts. I know it in 2024, it sounds like I don't understand. So they put on a program. But what I want people to understand is this: the model looked like this when we had people at meetings. Take 1 hour and jam in as much product information as you possibly can about our long-term growth, our short-term growth, our mid-term growth. Look at this chart. Look what we did in 5 years, 3 years, 10 years. The reason why I say it took guts is a lot of times at these types of meetings, that financial institution's paying money to even be there. They're paying money for that hour. Imagine the conversation to tell a company, how about we take that hour and we spend 3 minutes talking about your product and 57 minutes designed to help that audience become more successful. That's why I think it took guts. Because on the surface, Dana, I'm a sales manager. I'm going, well, wait a minute. We're paying $10,000 for this hour and we're not going to talk about us. No, but we think good things will happen. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And I got to tell you, people looked at me like I had three heads, like that dog in Harry Potter, and everybody was scared of that dog for a good
Right.
reason. But I work with some great people who really sort of got it,
Yeah.
as I would say. And they said, all right, let's do this. Let's give it a try. We'll test it out. And it worked
Yeah.
because the salesperson could come back tomorrow.
Yeah.
He's kind of he has this. I talked a little bit about reciprocity. All he did was he got the invite to come back. Oh, that's great. Can you tell me more about it? All right. Then I'm sitting here and we could then easily train them using some of that Rob Jollis customer-centered selling method,
Ding.
train them on how to now make that transition to, I'd like to spend a few minutes now talking about, whatever my product is.
Yeah, but see how smart that is, Dana. How many salespeople? Let's talk even like people who are selling in pharmaceutical, medical supplies. They'll tell you, I can't seem to get it. I can't sell a product. The doctor will only give me 20 seconds while I'm walking backwards down a hallway. And what you were doing at that time and what Van Campen was experimenting with was, let's not sell them here. Let's sell them on the fact that we're a relationship worth having and get them interested in us as a company and as a people. And then, as you just said, that client will take our appointment so we can sit down one-on-one and have a conversation. But I think everybody's in a hurry.
Yeah. And Rob, you took the words right out of my mouth. That is exactly it. You hit it. That's the beauty of this conversation. It's not just me just blathering away, which is most people know is common. It is this back and forth that we can have because you're right, and the fact is that if you're going to be a successful salesperson, and I think it's harder now than ever before because it's all virtual. Here we are on a podcast, right? How do I, that's how people engage today. I think,
Right.
like it or not, and I think what's really important though is that when you do these things, that it has to be something that's going to resonate, that it's going to have a certain amount of, it's not just like everybody else.
Right.
It can't be me too. And so, that's the other problem is that, look, we started talking about this in the 90s, and cut to 2024. And now, of course, everybody's doing it. But when I look out at the landscape, what I see is, oh, we are going to come in and we want to consult with you about your team or your practice. Well, guess what? So does everybody else. And
Right.
the other thing that's really important is uniqueness.
Right.
If you're not unique, I can get it elsewhere. Oh, and I would build some other programs, when I was at the great Janus Capital. I used to, people would say, well, could you do this? And I'd be like, no, but I know this guy over here, he does a great job. You don't need me. Go to him.
Right.
I was
And well, you
very,
did a lot at Janus. That was Janus Labs at the time. And folks, it was fun because I had a lot of fun because I had one of my programs was in there. Dana had five or six. But
I'll
we
have
had
the
lab
videos.
coats. We had lab coats, big white lab coats for Janus Labs. Tell me, in a month, I'm going to give you two questions.
Yeah.
And I'm going to tell you what the second one is. I want to hear what you're working on now. But go back and give me one or two of kind of the classics from the past so people can get an idea of the creativity that we were shooting for back then.
Well, here, I'll give you the one you and I worked on, right? We
Yeah.
called it personality and practice.
Yeah.
And the reality is, look, there's DISC, there's Colby, I found a new thing called Enneagram, which I'd never heard of, but
Oh, I
my wife
interviewed a guy on the
loves.
show who talked about it. Yeah, I
So
know it.
there you go. See, that's when I mentioned it to you, and then I had to go find the show. Uh, and then there's all these personality tests that you can take. Fill this out, and I know what you are. Here's the problem. You can't go to a customer and say, "Oh, I'd love to sell you this, but before I do, I need to know how to talk to you,"
Right.
because it doesn't really work that way. Here, fill this form out, Will,
Right.
and that'll help me, right? So what we did, Rob, is we came up with, we simplified it down to just three personality types. And then we said, all right, look around their office. What do you see? Do they have a lot of pictures of their family, or do they have pictures of, the American flag and a bronze eagle or something like that? That's a different type of personality. Is
Right.
their desk cluttered? Is it clean as a whistle? And each one of those personality types, then that gives you cues how to talk to people. So that was a
Right.
simple one that you and I came up with. And it was a fabulous presentation because people could use it all the time. And the reality is, if you're in any kind of sales or you're trying to persuade somebody of anything, you need to sort of understand what's the best way to ask the question.
Yeah.
So we did that. We did one we called the Art of Wow, uh, which was basically originally I saw a presentation by the great Ritz Carlton company, and I wanted to license their content. And they were like, "No, we don't do that." I said, "Okay, fine." I found a book how Ritz Carlton does it. I called the author, and we created. Basically, that's what they do. We came up with wow just because, oh wow, look at that. But the idea was, what are the very specific things that you can do? Because that was the other thing I learned when working with, whether it was people like yourself or psychologists or other experts, is that most good ones have a process and they look at things really, when I going back to elementary and middle school, the scientific method, right? They apply that basic method. Now, in Silicon Valley, they're going to call it first principles, but it's the same thing, and you create that and you follow that. And it's easier to learn. And B, it's very applicable. So we
Yeah.
taught people, how do you wow somebody? Well, that's a topic for another day. Another one was on negotiating. Again, went with professor at Wharton Business School, Richard Shell, fabulous instructor. He's still there. So if you're getting an MBA, go get Richard's class. But the reality is that, there are some very specific techniques that all negotiators use.
Yeah.
I'm not going to come in and help people, how to be a better teammate. Look, there's plenty of those. There's plenty of, well, if you want to know how to figure out when to start taking money for Social Security for your clients, there's calculators galore on the internet, and they're provided by a lot of really, really good companies that can walk you through it. That's not what I believe is really all that unique because there's lots of companies doing it.
Right. Well, in anything we do, any sales product we've got to kind of find our niche and our unique aspect of it. And even going back to that personality and practice, I think what made it unique was as you said, we let people in on the bad news, which is you're not going to be able to assess your clients, and you might only have an email or a voicemail or a picture on a wall. But B, once you cue in, figure out how that sales process expands or contracts. Put the two together. I remember it was almost like that Reese's bar, the chocolate was the sales process, but the peanut butter was the personality. And together they made a heck of a candy bar. But alone, they were both missing something. So that's an example of to me of creativity. Can I tell you one real fast? And
Yeah.
we'll bring in another name here, a guy that we both know. who's been on the show once, a guy named Scott West. And
Huh.
Scott, the reason why
Right.
Dana's smiling and laughing is because Scott West is a very creative person. And I remember he had a presentation once. I don't think he delivered it a lot because it was expensive to deliver, but it was Language Wave. It was the name of it. And he actually flew a Disney artist out with him, a makeup artist, who had created kind of a Mrs. Doubtfire mask for him that looked like his father. And so he came out as Scott West's father to introduce Scott to the audience. And then he pulled the mask off and he had a few things to say. And then that's called getting the attention of an audience. Al Pacino would say in Scent of a Woman, I'm just getting warmed up. I mean, that was the first 5 minutes. Very cool presentation. I don't want to lose our focus here, but that's like everything else, not only do we want to offer a value add, and I've seen Dana do his negotiation pieces. He's not just telling you about negotiation, really cool simulations, very interesting small group exercises. But particularly for negotiation, Dana, it's something that obviously we can talk about, but you got to pick up that golf club and swing it a few times.
Yep.
Tell me about that a little bit. The creativity you put around it.
Yeah, Rob, it's a great question. Thank you. When you think about what we did with those presentations is, one, you're right. We had a couple of role plays, depending on how much time. If you had an hour, you got one role play. If you had 2 hours, you had a couple of three, depending on what was going on. But the idea is, one, you got to engage your audience. And B, just doing one role play, it forces you to practice. And what I learned was that do it early because you're gonna make a mistake. The best way to learn something is you make a mistake. And then you go, oh, I wish I'd done this instead of that. And sometimes people would think that I got the best deal. And the reality is, nah, there's a better deal out there, but you just have to really look. So we taught them those things along with the process. And again, it was what I was saying before. It's like you internalize it and you start looking around and you go, oh, yeah, that's a negotiation. I mean, look, a negotiation is anytime you want something from somebody else or they want something from you. So, hey, Rob, pass the salt. That's a negotiation. You could say no. I mean, God forbid you'd say it if I said it at my table when I was a kid growing up, the first thing my mother would say is, no, you're eating too much salt. It's going to raise your heart rate. It's not good for you. Don't eat so much salt. I don't know about you, but I take my salt in large quantities. Probably not the best thing. My doctor probably doesn't love it. I hate to admit it, but that's me, right? So you know, even that little simple negotiation. Now, this was trying to teach people about, how do you approach these things? And oh, by the way, negotiation isn't a whole lot different than selling. I mean, you could apply elements of, and we would sometimes talk about this if we had the time. Oh, you saw that Jollis guy, especially if it was a bigger meeting where you were on and maybe I was on or whatever. Oh, you learned this, you can apply this here, and then, that takes it to the next level, or this is how you approach. So the idea was you start to look at it, you start to internalize, yeah, I'm negotiating now. And then, and look, it doesn't matter whether you're going in to buy a lamp at a flea market where you have to negotiate because if you don't, what's wrong with you? We had a great little video of that. Um, and to just about any circumstance that you're facing where you're trying to persuade somebody and get them. And it isn't always win-win, but it's like, yeah, well, how do you get, what are the concepts? What are the simple concepts of negotiating? There's only four. Yeah, four. There's only four.
He's showing four fingers, ladies and gentlemen. Four fingers are on the screen. Keep going.
Okay. So there's yeah, and you just kind of follow that process. And
Yeah.
oh, by the way, and it should be the same for anybody selling anything. You start with your homework. Who am I
Mm,
talking to? What are they interested in?
yeah.
What would they really care about? Why would they want to enter into this? If you're talking to the guy selling, a lamp at a flea market, well, he wants to sell a lamp. And maybe you want to buy a lamp, and if that may be that's a good start. But what else can you find out? Is there something you can find out about them, personally? Yeah, where are you from? Don't start with Hey, how much for the lamp? You know, you're
Right.
better off to start finding some way to like them,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. You know something, Dana? Really, I think what you just brought up, not just negotiation and selling as well,
Yeah,
is probably the most undervalued piece that people just completely walk by. They don't even notice, which is that pre-call planning, that homework. And I will tell you, I've been at what I do for 31 on my own, another 8 with zero. I'm close to 40 years as a sales trainer. It took me 35 of those years to realize that sometimes the best way to train a company is to uh, not just throw them into a role play and then mumble, don't forget the pre-call plan when you're not here, but to allow them to collaborate and pre-call plan. And
yeah,
I mean for a half hour.
yeah,
And when I say collaborate, I mean usually a role play is done in three people, with three people. So you've got, even if it's 30 people, 10 people playing the same role. Get together and strategize and start figuring out where the objections may occur. What problem are we potentially trying to fix? What questions might we ask? There's so many. I mean, tell me which one not to ask, but I just wish I had been, as a sales trainer, I had been more diligent about this in my career. But I'm so glad you brought it up now. Negotiation, absolutely. Almost anything we do not fall asleep on that planning. You're shooting yourself in the foot when you do.
absolutely. And today, look, I mean, you would be amazed what people put out on social media. I mean, we all go to LinkedIn, but that's a business thing. There's nothing personal on LinkedIn. You never know. You can look them up on Facebook, look them up on X, look them up on Instagram. Sometimes you can see their content, sometimes you can't. You'd be amazed how many people kind of leave a lot of content out there. And you look at the background of a picture and, oh, you're in Florida. Well, when you see them, you go like, oh, you got to be careful how you ask the question. Hey, I was stalking you on the internet, and when I noticed a palm tree behind you. Were you on vacation or was that your house?
Saw you at the movies the other night. Did you enjoy it? Yeah,
How'd
yeah,
you like it? No, but the point is you spend a little bit of time, try to figure it out. Google them. You'd be amazed sometimes what just shows up when you Google somebody.
yeah.
And then you find out and and again don't start with let me tell you about whatever my product is. Start with, hey, where are you from? Or I noticed something in your office here, or how do you like that car? There's always something that you can start a relationship with because good salespeople, they really have the best relationships. In fact, there was a study by KPMG. You talk about, analyze the heck out of things. They created this whole monster algorithm and they looked at all their salespeople. And at the end of the day, what they were trying to figure out is who gets more contracts than others. And what they found is those salespeople that had the strongest relationships with their clients or prospects had a 75% contract rate versus the middle guys were in the 40s and the lower guys were at around 15. They are all selling the same products, KPMG, consulting services, accounting services, whatever. But the relationship people that had the best relationships had made the most money, salespeople, had the most success, and did the most for the company, which ultimately turned into good things for their families too. So, starting with a good relationship, just that simple little thing there, do your homework on that. And
Yeah,
then what is it that they want to buy, or what don't they want to buy, or what do they already own?
right,
Well, and don't be afraid to ask,
right.
but before you launch into let me tell you all about my product. And then you get done and they're like, oh, it's funny you should bring this up, but we just bought the same thing from those guys. Oh, great.
Right.
uh,
You
uh,
know, one of the
can
first
I
customers,
introduce you into a ring? Sorry
yeah,
you don't want a Rolex.
one of the first customers that I was introduced to were banks. And
Yeah,
when I would go to the banks, to your point, Dana, and it wasn't necessarily a negotiation, it was just trying to establish a relationship with a customer. So does it matter if we say negotiation or not? It kind of doesn't. And they were some major banks, and these I'll probably leave the names off of for now.
yeah,
But I can assure you, banks you've heard of uh, would proudly show me the fact that, of course, we're asking questions of our clients. We use a sheet right here. This is, 30 questions or whatever. And I would look at that sheet and they all look the same. First of all, 90% of the questions were closed. So it did sound more like an interrogation. But
Right.
the first or second question always was, do you have a problem with this? Are you concerned about that? And it's 1B to, why don't you just offer a solution and continue to waste everybody's time? How do you warm up a relationship by immediately swinging at my head, and making me feel badly? It's not a waste of time for a lot of us to do what Dane is saying, which is, we're not asking, gee, do you think, the Commanders are going to make the playoffs, which I do believe they will. But you're asking them questions that are pertinent. Like, tell me about the family. Tell me about where we're doing this and that. For a financial planner, that's an important question. But we don't have to say, what scares you at night? We don't need to be there yet, right? And that's what you're talking about, kind of warming them up.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, if I have a good relationship with you, you're more likely to answer those tougher questions.
Right.
Then you get to what keeps you up at night. But
Exactly.
you can't launch into that. I mean, it's more of, tell me more about, yourself. Tell me more about your family. Oh, you got a
Right.
picture of your kids here. They're, what school do they go to? Or are they thinking about going to school? Or,
Yeah.
oh, they go to so-and-so elementary. Great. How do you like that? How are their
Right.
teachers? I mean, it doesn't really matter per se how you get it started, but you need to meet the person at their doorstep. You can't bring them to yours. You
Right.
really, I worked with a guy it was about asking the right questions. But what he talked about is, you're on a stage. Whose stage are you on? Are you on your stage, which is when you're out there and you're playing Shakespeare? Or are you on their stage? Because where you meet them on their stage, then now you have a relationship. Now you have the ability, and their stage is all about getting them to answer questions. It's not about you chatting away.
Yeah. Well, that's a really good point. Here's a screwy question for you, but I'm curious because I've dabbled in negotiation. You are clearly the master. I'm more of the sales guy in this conversation. Dane is the negotiation guy, delivered a lot in that area. But I dabbled in it, and occasionally when the simulations were really good, there were almost, no, I shouldn't say almost, there were hard feelings. It got emotional a little bit. So I'm
Yeah.
curious, and I'm not, I don't deliver it the volume you deliver. Have you seen that in some of your negotiation programs that you delivered?
Oh yeah, of course, because there's different types of negotiations. One of the things we would teach people is there are negotiation styles, or you call them a personality, right? So,
Right, right,
at one end is the alligator negotiator, win-win no matter what. Every nickel counts. I'm counting whatever it is, and I'm going to get the most. And then at the other end is the people who are negotiate whatever it is. If that the lamp is $100, here, let me just give you the money and I get out of here, because the fear that they have, right? So then there's a spectrum. And so when you deal with like that alligator guy and you're not quite so happy and you feel like you've been taken advantage of, that's not so win-win. Now, I don't know that you have to have a win-win, because I really don't believe that. Somebody's going to hopefully everybody gets what they want, but nobody gets exactly what they wanted. You have to compromise, right? That's part of negotiating. So there's a compromise on both sides, whatever. But yeah, you had people that would come in. And then, by the way, we would cast some of these presentations, and you talk about preparation. I would literally go to the firm. I had my own, my little stack of the standards, which I love. But, sometimes I would customize it. If I was doing with a particular group, I would talk to like a senior manager, maybe one of their lead salespeople, to say, all right, give me an example of a situation, and then we'll craft it where there's a buyer and a seller. We had another one where, yeah, the best outcome was actually nobody paid anything, nobody, but there was a transaction that took place. I don't want to give it away, because if I do it,
no, 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 no.
way too much fun. But the
Right.
point is, that sometimes what I would like to say to people is it's rarely about the money in a negotiation. It's rarely about, those most obvious things. It's almost always the other things that people need. Even if you're going to get a job, okay, here's how much we'll pay you. Yeah, you can ask for more money, right? But have you what's the culture like? Well, that's a little harder to discern. You got to do a little work there, but you can always, if you're negotiating for a job, what are the benefits? Are there any other benefits that you can get? Oh, you need to move. How much are they going to pay for the move? Maybe you could get more out of that. Maybe it gets you more time off before you get started or during the time to make your move. Or it just depends on what is your interest and what the company's interests are. They may want you immediately, maybe not. Maybe they're willing to be flexible. So it isn't always about that. Oh, how much are you going to pay me, as an example. Um, there's always something else there, and you need to figure out what that is. And that takes questions. It takes some basic, frankly, just research, you
Right.
know.
Well, let me ask you this, and we're coming in for a landing now,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I want to go one more question deeper into this. I agree with you, but I want to hear your philosophy on this, not mine. I
Yeah.
agree with you that in the books we see win-win. Everybody's going for a win-win, win-win. I can't remember a time I played Monopoly and everybody was out for a win-win, quite frankly. But that's more game mentality. That's perhaps not fair. But you sort of also said, yeah, that's out there, but I good luck finding that. So if win-win is not exactly the unicorn, but a little bit more challenging to get to in the real world, what takes its place? What is there if not a win-win for us, the negotiator? Let's put us as the seller here in a sense.
Yeah, I think, the question is really understanding what is it that the buyer is looking for, right?
Right.
Is it, if like there's a great example in your customer centered selling book. You were buying a car. Is it really the car? There's lots of cars, right? Or is it some safety features that this car has, right? Like there's certain brands that are known for their safety. Um, and that may be something where maybe it's not as, maybe this car is as safe as the one you think is safer. You just need to figure that out. Does that really matter? If you have a family with a bunch of kids and they're gonna, they want to try and see if the car seat fits in the back, safety's probably not something you want to avoid talking about, right? Or, so it isn't necessarily just about, the price of a car.
Right.
Maybe it's that you have top-notch service, or hey, let me introduce you to, your service guy. I mean, I've driven the same kind of car for almost as long as I've known you. It's not the same car, but I've replaced a few. The reason I go back is because of the service guy.
Right.
I know that he is going to treat me as well as anybody I've ever been treated.
Right.
And that matters. I mean, it wouldn't matter to me if they changed the sign outside the dealership and said, "Oh, we're no longer selling this brand. We're going to sell Yugos. We found a bunch of them in a junkyard somewhere, but
Yeah.
we're going to have a Yugo store here." If this guy was still there, I'd be talking to them
Right.
because he'd make sure that Yugo was running, which believe me would not probably not going to ever happen. But the point is that that's what would matter to me.
Right. Right. No, and that pre-call planning and coming in nice and easy and letting that person open up is going to teach you what you just said because they don't send that in an email. You have to figure that out
Oh.
when you're in there.
And by the way, I would probably pay a little bit more because I know I got this guy instead of either a
Right.
different kind of car or something else
Right.
because of that service after the sale. And I mean, look, everything is unique. So that's my win-win. So my
Right.
win-win isn't necessarily your win-win. So, and I don't really believe in win-win. It's like, look, I got good enough, right? That's kind of, and it works that way on both sides. You,
Right.
if you're building financial plans for people, it's a lot of work, takes a lot
Right.
of time.
Right.
So, what's that win, right?
Right.
What
Dana, when I started into the conversation, I had to correct myself because I said something that really wasn't right. when I brought up the word monopoly and said, who's looking for a win-win in monopoly? I want to be clear on that. That is a mistake. That's what we would call a win-lose. Okay. Meaning I want to win and I want to take all your money and
Right.
watch you lose. I may win the game of Monopoly, but Dana isn't going to play with me anymore. Okay. Now, so that actually is relevant in a customer situation that we really don't, even if we can get at what we're looking for. If the client feels like they lost and you won, well, congratulations, you got your contract signed, you got whatever it is. But ultimately, that's going to cost you a fortune. You're never going to be dealing with this client anymore. How many others will they be telling? Believe it or not, Dana,
Yep.
I've always leaned on a lose win, meaning if I and it's not a perfect umbrella, so we can create many scenarios that won't fit here. But when I'm working in my industry, a lot, yeah, and it's really coming down the home stretch here, I'll, in a sense, take a loss uh, because and tell the client, but we do everything we say we're going to do. The next one I want at bang or whatever. And so I'm saying I'll lose this one. I'd like to win the next one. Can we agree on that one? And that's been more real world than me finding this mythical win-win for everybody.
Exactly, Rob. And let me just throw one little thought out there.
Uh-huh.
That's basically, we talked a little bit about reciprocity. That is a
Yeah.
key point, right? I give something to you, you owe me. Guess what? That's called a concession. All
Right.
negotiators, right? You concede something. Guess what? If you concede first, the other person owes you. And we would always say, when no doesn't mean no. No means you better well have at least one or two more alternatives, right?
Mhm.
When you come in and you say it's going to cost, X, and the client's like, oh, well, I don't know if I have the budget, the end of the year, it's beginning of the whatever. And you come back with, well, okay, tell you what, we'll do it at this, but then I want the next one at, the full
Right.
price. You've conceded. Guess what? Not normally they owe you.
Right.
Simple concept, and it's incredibly powerful.
It is. It's
Many people
actually
don't
my
know.
career is, it's a major part of my career, particularly when we've got a product that we believe in, that we believe will exceed the customer's expectations. Don't be afraid to give up a little coming out of the gate if you can deliver, because you'll get it back and then some. And that's how we develop long-term relationships. All right, Dana, two quick last question and a half. One,
Yes,
a program you're delivering now, because the 1B is going to be how people get a hold of you.
right.
Okay.
Okay. Well, so I have a couple different things, but
Mhm.
they're as you started at the beginning. So, I have a program on negotiating, which is very specific to negotiating, and I
Good.
wrap into that some of the basic rules of persuasion based on the work of Professor Robert Cialdini. If people don't know who he is, well, I'll give you a simple story. One day he got an envelope from Berkshire Hathaway. Charlie Munger sent him a letter that said, Warren and I have made hundreds of millions of dollars using the concepts in your book. The book is called Influence, the Psychology of Persuasion. But anyway, here is, as a token of our appreciation, here's a share of Berkshire Hathaway A shares, which today, I have no idea what they're worth today, but the other day they were $700,000 each. They're probably closer to eight now because it was a good day in the stock market.
Right.
The point is, out of the blue, just as a token of appreciation. That gives you an idea of the power of this guy's book. The point is that, I can take those concepts. Now there are seven different principles. There's a lot more there. You can't just unpack that. You got to be drinking from a fire hose to do that. But I wrap some of those principles in a simple presentation on negotiating. And again, you can start with an hour. There's only so much you're going to learn in an hour. And I can
But you can do a good keynote, blow in and
you
do a
can
good
do a
keynote for
great
a company.
keynote. But then the idea is, look, I really want to come back and I'll spend, a half a day, whatever, a firm wants to really break into it and,
Right.
go from, basically trying to use drink from a fire hose to, okay, let's turn it into, a normal amount and we'll have several cups of coffee over these concepts. And we're going to work through what they are and how to apply them and how to be good at this so that when you're out in the real world, you start to see these things you start to employ them. And then, oh, by the way, maybe, I'm not looking to just be one and done. Okay, thanks for your 30, 40 minutes or your hour or your 4 hour day or whatever it is. No, I'm happy to consult. I'm happy to get on this,
Right.
on
Right.
a
Right.
Zoom or a telephone call.
Right.
Give me your problem. Let's walk
Right.
through. I have a great little process for how to say, all right, well, what is it? And how do we find a solution?
All right. How do people get a hold of you, Dana?
Well, best way is my email. My company is called Klein Strategies. My email is Dana, Dana, at Klein, Klein, like Calvin, hyphen strategies, strategies.com.
There you go.
The website will be klein-strategies.com. It's under construction right now, but it should be up by the time you produce this thing.
All right.
And my cell phone number. Believe me, I answer the phone, especially if you're not. I don't have to worry about all those political calls that I used to get.
Right. Especially if you're a prospect, he'll be happy to answer your call.
Yeah, exactly.
Good. Well, you hit a home run on everything except you forgot somebody else who writes about persuasion, me. But that's okay. You like these other authors better,
Listen,
and I understand.
Here's the difference.
I'm not hurt at all. Why would that bother me? Why? Nah,
Rob,
I'm bigger than that.
Rob, here's how I would classify it.
Yes.
You said it when we were talking about like negotiating as well.
Right.
You had a program on negotiating. You're taking great sales concepts and applying them to the how do you persuade people, right? Change minds. That's your book. It's a great book. I love it. It's on my shelf, and I even have it on my Kindle and my.
Good going. Yes.
This is what makes you so good. Sorry to smoke here, but
go ahead. Why am I so good? I forgot.
Most academics talk
Yes.
to other academics.
Yep.
Right. And when you call them up and you say, hey, could you help me? Usually what they're going to say is, yeah, I'll tell you how this works. And then you're smart enough, you'll figure out how to apply. And furthest thing from the truth. The truth is you need to take these concepts and you need to figure out how to apply them. And you do a phenomenal job of that in everything that you do. The stories that you tell, the examples that you give are very much right on. Now, and that's sort of what I'm trying to do as well, is take these much deeper scientific principles, if you will, apply them to a negotiation process, which I think is the most usable thing for most people and really any sales thing. The difference between sales and a negotiation is basically at the end of a negotiation, somebody has something to lose by not going through with the deal, Right. But that's, like a house, you don't buy the house, you lose the escrow, you put down. But everything else is pretty much the same.
All right. I'm like, you said some nice things. I've now forgiven you. All is well. I'm sorry I had to give you a poke there. But anyway, listen, he's Dana Klein. He's Dana at kleinstrategies.com. Don't forget the hyphen. I know this man in business longer than just about anybody else I've ever met in business. And I can tell you he's the real deal. He knows what he's talking about, forgets a little bit about Jollis now and then, but then he remembers. It's okay. And Dana, I just want you to know, absolute pleasure finally having you on your show. I wish you nothing but good luck, and I'm grateful you came on, truly.
Rob, thank you so much. I can't appreciate enough the time that you've given me really over the years, your advice. And by the way, people, this is a great man. You have a question, send him an email. He'll respond. Read his articles. If you haven't read his articles, you're really missing something. And he's the world's greatest conjunction creator.
Right. I told you I forgave you for leaving me off your reading list. You're okay. Anyway, Dana, thanks for coming on. And folks, we'll do it again as well as we can next time. Until then, stay safe.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please rate and recommend it on iTunes, Outcast, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also get more information on this show and Rob at jollis.com.